Life, it's a work in progress. It's about moments, memories, people, connections. And every interaction that I do with people that matters to me motivates me and inspires me to be better and to continue progressing in this work of life. Conversations with extraordinary people about this beautiful journey called life. And you're going to find it here in the Visible Audio Podcast. So thank you everybody for joining us today. This is our first kind of visual and not only audio recording. So I do have a very wonderful guest. She's a friend of mine, and I'm very pleased to say that because she has so many things going on for herself. And I'll let her introduce herself in a little bit. But as you have seen, we're going to talk about culture and why is it so important. And probably we're going to be going on for a long time about the topic, and we probably could do another recording about the topic because I think this is important for both of us, my guest and I. So I want to welcome Dee. Hello, Dee.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm doing good, doing well.
So I haven't told the audience yet, but you have a podcast as well. And can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes. So my podcast is labeled DRW, and you can actually find it on a lot of podcasting platforms. Um, I started out using Anchor, and so Anchor
Mhm.
has like pushed it out in every podcast platform. So the series that I'm currently talking about is called Black in Nature. And so what I'm doing is I'm taking the hashtag and basically sharing my truth, my story.
Mhm.
Um, but it's also like in a very poetic type of way too.
Uh-huh.
Um, it's a different approach, but it's also just like sharing the truth. So topics that I've shared so far is episode 1 was my truth, and
Mhm.
then episode 2 is I'm not my hair. So if
Which
that
I'm
just gives you an
dying
idea,
to, I'm dying to hear.
like two different extremes.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so a lot of what my podcast represents is personal stories. I tend to share things in narratives.
Mhm.
So I hope people just enjoy it.
Yes. I know I did. The first episode was really, especially if you like to kind of have a visual of, things. I think that you have a really nice way to take us there. Like, because we can't see it, but as we hear it, it's just like you're taking us into a story, and it's pretty neat. So I can't wait to hear the second one. We were just talking about hair since it's related to our culture. but but yeah, more of that in a little bit. So, um, well, first of all, as always, I usually start the episodes with the meaning of the word because I think that kind of take us to a place of better understanding. So the meaning that I got for culture in this case is culture is the customs, art, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social groups. Very generic, very standard to what it is. But also, as I do in my podcast, I ask my guests to bring a quote, and I have a quote as well, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in detail and what it means to us. So the one that I got is in Spanish, so I try to translate it so many times. I'm not a translator, so please bear with me, Dee. But it basically says, in Spanish first, la educación no se resuelve mediante un método, sino mediante el conocimiento de la cultura. And what my broken Spanish English translation means is education does not get fixed through a method, but through the knowledge of culture. And that's but a famous Peruvian writer called Jose Maria Arguedas, and he concentrated a lot on the culture, and I think the word education here means also like your own bring up and your own knowledge, not necessarily education in school base, but also your own education. And I really like that because I truly believe that education, I think knowing of culture, not only your own, but be open to other ones, also bring you knowledge, also bring you the capacity to know and learn and be aware of other things, right? I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are about the.
I definitely believe that. I think just growing up in so many different types of cultures, um, and just understanding like every culture, especially when it comes to education, like culture, I feel like should be the foundation of what education should be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when it's not reflected in the curriculum or how people are teaching, like I kind of question it honestly.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, how is this? But it's not like a true reflection of what's going on, you know?
Right. Right.
So,
That is very true. Well, that is very true, and I'm glad that you share that. And I kind of knew that you were going to share that thought because I know that you're into education as well, and your background is education basically. But when I read not only my quote but the meaning of it, it made me think about this about my own self and coach and having this culture versus tradition, because I have used them. I have used the terms, back and forth. I don't know. I mean, I know that there is a difference, but sometimes it's very difficult for me to differentiate the two. Um, and I feel that sometimes one feeds of each other.
mhm,
You have your kind of traditional ways to do things and your own tradition within your family maybe, but your culture has a lot of influence on that. I
mhm,
think in my case at least, we're bringing two different cultures into my family, um,
right.
right? I'm guessing you as well, probably.
My husband and I come from like almost two different worlds,
Uh-huh.
So I definitely felt like, regardless if I would have married him or anyone else, unless they grew up military, like I'm bringing in a totally different culture regardless. So, um, mixed in with the fact that like my parents and where they're from, that's also a big part of who I am. And then when you start like looking at like, well, where's the family from? And then you start to realize like, oh, well, I'm Puerto Rican and I'm Jamaican, but I have like a lot of Southern um, parts of me because that's just how my dad is. Like he's from South Carolina. So, um, and my mom's from the city. And, I used to kind of like tease her and like, are you really from the city? Which she is. Don't get me wrong. Mom, don't get mad. But um, they also went into the Air Force at the age of 18. So the Air Force played a huge role in kind of shaping them as adults, which then in turn like impacts my brother and I and who we are as people today. Um, so when it comes to traditions and the things that I carried from childhood till today, um, my parents raised my brother and I with like I'm not gonna say strict. It was just structured. It was just very military structure.
Right.
We had dinner together every night. That was like my entire childhood. And I do that as an adult. Like we sit at the table, we talk, we check in, we eat. Like we have our roles in what we do. I'm trying to think of other traditions. I don't know, like typical holidays. There wasn't
Mhm.
anything out of the norm. I definitely felt like we didn't grow up like traveling home, like traveling to see family during Christmas. That
Mhm.
was not a tradition at all because
Mhm.
sometimes we would be overseas. However, in my adult life, I feel like that's changed. Like traveling home for Christmas is like my family's tradition. it's almost kind of weird when we don't because we're not used to not being around the family.
Right.
So that's been a new thing, I feel like, for all of us, including my parents and my family that lives in San Antonio. That was just not something
Mhm.
we grew up doing. Um, and I also feel like I can't talk about tradition without talking about church because that's a huge piece to
Well, yeah.
um, whether we're either going frequently or not going, because that was also kind of a part of my life a little bit when I was younger, until my parents were like, we're going to go every Sunday. And, Christianity became a huge part of my life, and it still is today. So, um, but as far as culture, I definitely felt like my childhood and even as an adult, I think because my husband he's from Louisiana, so Southern traditions are a huge part of my life.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't feel like I can escape those things. But what I've wanted to do as an adult is I've wanted to really understand like who I am as an individual. Like, what does it mean to be Puerto Rican and Jamaican? What does that mean? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, well, and that's the thing too. I think that the better we understand where we come from, it helps to shape, our own culture within now your family,
Right.
and all those traditions and things that you said. um, I'm sure there are some that you have lived through your childhood and you have bring it up with you, like you mentioned. But I'm sure there's a lot of other ones that you kind of pick and choose what you want
Mm-hmm.
to pick and carry with you and what you want to stay away from.
Right.
And, but it's so interesting because within your own family, there's so many components that and I think that for a family that has similar backgrounds, maybe they're from the same country, maybe they're from the same town even, that gets complicated. But you add somebody that is from another country or from another background, somebody that is maybe from a military background that marries with somebody that is not. It's can you it's a lot. It's a lot to carry. And how do you kind of balance that? Because um I think that how culture has shaped us is um it's going to reflect a lot in our adulthood. I can say personally that I do have a lot of mixtures that are confusing at times, because I do have, obviously, I'm Peruvian. I was brought up there, until I was 19 almost. So the majority of my childhood has been there. But, looking back, it's been about the same time that I have been in the United States, about 18, 19 years. So,
Wow.
yeah, so at this point, I'm kind of, it's a kind of a weird situation because um, I don't feel American enough, but I don't feel Peruvian enough. And so I'm like this half and half. And it's funny because I think I have, obviously, my adulthood, I have lived here. So most of the things that I do now are very much Americanized. So when I talk with my family in Peru, it's a little strange. But then when I talk to, when I would relate to friends or people like that, then my Peruvian side comes out a little bit, and it's almost like it's funny. It's funny to how I interact with my Peruvian friends and family, and how I interact with my American friends and family. It's just, I don't know if that had happened to you. I see you nodding a lot.
I'm
So.
sitting here nodding because I was listening. I tend to listen to podcasts on the weekend, like
Mhm.
when I'm cleaning or whatever I'm doing. And gosh, I hope I can't even remember the name of the podcaster. But, anyways, the point of the podcast, they were talking about like diversity in education.
Okay.
And the podcaster was interviewing a woman of color, and she's Black, and she's been in the education system, I want to say like 20 plus years. So she's very knowledgeable. but she was talking about, what I found fascinating is she was talking about like being a woman of color and growing up where um, she was growing up in, I want to say, the South. And so she was a part of that generation that
Mhm.
was bused to like a white school district, whereas like schools were no longer segregated. And I found it really interesting because she was just talking about like some of these like weird moments where people were trying to connect with her. So like she would go home where everybody was black, but then she'd go to school and it would be something completely different. And they're trying to connect with her and she's trying to connect with them. And so there's this weird like disconnect that she felt. And I was sitting
Mhm.
there like, oh my gosh, and she was just talking about like she is like who she is, and not that she's like a chameleon, but she would slide into these like different social spaces where like, she, when she's working with her employer, she's very professional, but when she's talking with her friends, she's having a good time, like, yeah, girl, blah 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 blah, but it was just like, yeah, I can totally relate to that,
Right.
because it's not like I'm changing myself. I'm still me, but I just kind of like pop into these weird pockets where even now, like I haven't, my husband's been medically retired from the Army 5 years. And so I've always still felt like, well, I'm still a military spouse. But even now, when I sit with military spouses, there's this weird like disconnect, and it's because I haven't been in that space for 5 years.
Yeah.
um I even feel that sometimes, like, and you might be able to relate to this too, but like sometimes, like if I'm with mom groups, and I'm not the mom that stayed home, I'm a working professional and we're
Mhm.
educated, and sometimes that creates like, not like an awkwardness, but like it just, I find myself like, I'm just not going to talk about like career stuff. I try to like focus on what we can connect on, which is
Mhm.
being a parent. So I feel like it happens all the time in the different roles that I fall into. I'm like, okay, that was awkward. But it does, I definitely think it impacts me every day.
Yeah.
Um, but at least with my friends, like I don't feel that way. It's the people that don't really know me and I don't really
Mhm.
know them, and we're trying to like make some sort of a connection. It can be
Yeah, and I think that that's the main thing because we as human beings want to connect naturally to other people. And how do we do that? I think it's through culture, through our
difficult.
own culture. You're gonna kind of guide yourself and attract yourself more to those people that have shared similarities with you, mostly in childhood, mostly on who you are or maybe what you do. Like you said, working moms, you kind of can identify and relate more to them because they have a certain culture. We have a certain
Mm-hmm.
culture on ourselves of we understand the struggles that we go through. um, the same with other groups. And I think that when I read the meaning of it, the social group kind of piece of it attracted to me because I'm like, yeah, you think about your own culture and maybe where you come from or your nationality, but when you are an adult, you start seeing more of that social group.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be open to everybody, yes, but you're gonna end up being more attracted to a certain group that you feel more affiliation with. And um and and it's funny. I love to hear, especially where you come from, because I think that that's such a awesome mixture, Jamaican and Puerto Rican. Because I have Puerto Rican friends. I don't have Jamaican friends, but I can only imagine that the richness of that culture. And to me, in a way, I think there's some similarities there because I feel that like when I think about those two countries or those two cultures, I think about happiness and joy and enlightenment. And because I never met personally a Puerto Rican that it's sad or not laughing or not partying or something.
Yes, prideful. You
Yeah.
probably admit
Oh,
a lot of
yes.
pride.
And prideful and prideful. I do have, like I said, one of my best friends is Puerto Rican, so I know that flag. They wear it proudly.
Yes.
They're so proud of their own culture, and I love that because that reflects, you know.
Yes, yes.
And I don't know if there's there's something specific that you lean towards because in my case, like I said, I originally am from Peru, but um, in my own family, I also have like weird mixtures, but it's very strong. And if you see, and it's from one is from my mom's side of family, the other one is from my dad's side of the family.
Wow.
And and it's so interesting. And aside of that, obviously I have also my grandfather was Peruvian, and I'm so proud of that heritage as well, because that comes also with a lot of richness and a lot of
Hmm.
appreciation that I have for my country. And but yeah, it's just, but all that within the culture of Peru and the culture of Lima, specifically where I'm from, because it's on itself, it's a whole podcast that it's just weird. But yeah, but a lot of people that are from Peru are from mixed cultures. There's a lot of
Hmm.
um, we have a very strong African Peruvian heritage that I love. By the way, I've always been very drawn to it. And my mom tells me a story when I was little that I always was, very, very just attracted by that culture. I don't know why, but I love it. I love it. And then a lot of other things, and I'm sure that with you too. I mean, there is that heritage of being Jamaican and Puerto Rican, and but yet you're living in the United States, so that adds on another layer. So
Yes.
is there something from those cultures that kind of that it's you, like it's part of you for sure and very strong?
I feel like so it's interesting. I'll just speak to like the Puerto Rican side because I don't know enough about the Jamaican side to like speak about it
Mm-hmm.
firmly. Um, but I just know like I feel like traditionally when I've met other folks that are Puerto Rican, they're extremely prideful, all of those things. And I'm like, well, I'm Puerto Rican too, but I don't really feel like I reflect that. But as I've gotten older and like had a better understanding of like who my Nana is, who my
Mm-hmm.
mom is, I'm like, oh no, it's there. It's just reflected very differently. Like we're more of the like we're just very strong. Like I don't feel like there's anything I don't want to say like we can endure anything, but I feel like we can. And so like that's a big part of I feel like the culture. Like you're
Uh-huh.
just strong, very present. Um not too many things can wave me. Like I'm just like, okay, so let's keep going. But I always just thought it was like, oh, that's their personality. But I've learned
Mhm.
over time, like that's a part of the culture. So of course that's been passed down to me. Um, and so I've always kind of operated that way. I mean, I feel like people that know me, they're just like, yes, I have a lot of personality, but in certain situations, you don't always see that personality coming through.
Yeah.
Um, but also, I think when it comes to another big piece, like we were talking about before we started recording, is my eclectic style. I love color. Like I don't know too many Puerto Ricans that don't like color.
That's true.
And my mom always teases me and my Nana. She's like, oh my goodness, you are your grandmother's child. Like, I am here for the color. So is my Nana. We both have eclectic styles. Um, I definitely feel like, I mean, I've taken from both, but it just reflects, like, I just feel like I'm a byproduct of like my mom, who was this professional woman. And so I have that carries me. And then I have my Nana who worked with children in her home for many, many years. And that's a big part of who I am today. But collectively, who they are and their styles and how that reflects in them as being Puerto Rican women, that's who I am. Like, it reflects. Ironically, this is kind of crazy. I don't want anyone to come after me, but I don't have like any of the flags. Like, I don't have a flag representing, but I have art. I'm like, but yet I have art from Puerto Rico. You know what I mean? Like, that's just more, that to me is just more of my style.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that I don't represent and I don't say like, this is who I am. So when I'm introducing myself, it's a big, like, introducing, because people make assumptions. They see you and they're like, oh, you're Black. Yes, I am Black. Yeah. You know, but you know, I'm not just that. Like, this is me, you know.
Well, yeah, and that's the other important thing. I think that we have taken this into also transforming into our own selves, because aside of all the things that we have layered on, we also have us, like, as a person. You know, here's me. It might not look like something, but it's me.
Right.
Yeah, and the misconceptions that people have about how we are supposed to look and how we're supposed to be. And I really want to get in detail a little bit about that specifically, but I don't want to forget about your quote, because I'm dying to hear it. So if you do have it handy, I would love to hear. You do.
This is not like a fancy quote, so I kind of need to like explain to people where this stemmed from.
Yeah.
I spent an entire week at a conference online, and one of the folks, I shouldn't say one of the folks, one of the presenter mentors wrote this quote in the chat, and they were like, quote from D of 2020 Summer Institute. And I'm like, what kind of quote did I say? So I wrote it down, and so I'm going to share it. And what I was basically talking about was education, but I was also talking about environmental education and how I nature. And most people that know me, they either know or they don't know, but I have sensory to like touching things or textures. I don't like to touch things that may feel like really uncomfortable. But it doesn't mean that I don't go through those experiences. I've just made accommodations for myself so I can experience them. So that's where this quote is coming from. Okay, so the quote is this me putting a limit on myself or my environment putting limits on me? And this is really important because, again, I'm so used to, when I'm talking about like nature and doing that type of work, people have this assumption like what this type of work of working in nature should look like. They think, well, you should be hiking. You've never camped before? I don't understand. That's just not how I nature. I like to do things in the garden. I don't like to touch soil. It makes me really kind of creep out a little bit. But I wear garden gloves, you know, so things like that, like not taking what people think, like whatever limits that they think they're putting on me, or am I putting the limit on myself? Because sometimes it's all in your head versus your environment. And so I just think in the moment of when I was saying that, I was just basically trying to get people to understand, like, you have to think about that sometimes. Like, is it me or is it the environment? And if it's the environment, then what am I going to do? And if it's me, what am I going to change?
Right.
And just don't limit yourself and don't let other people limit you, you know, just have to keep going.
That is very, very nice. I really like that, especially for that portion of it where you're explaining that, you know, it goes back to what I said before about misconceptions, you know, because, you know, you like the outdoors. People just think that, oh, then you are, you know, a camper and you just, you know, touch things that you don't want to touch, which is something that you
See
don't
the
like.
space? Do you guys see the space? sometimes there's look of terror because I'm like, I don't have my gloves. I need my gloves, my garden gloves or whatever,
And
face of terror.
I can only imagine that because until you just said that, I mean, I kind of knew that about you, but until you just said that, it kind of reminds me of moments that, yeah, that is true. You don't really like textures and stuff like that. And I'm sorry if I might have exposed you to some things forcefully in the past. I want to apologize.
But the thing is, it's totally like part of like recognizing like I have like texture things, and owning it is that I still work with young children. Well, most of the time when we're not in pandemic life. Um, so working with young children in a lot of ways has forced me to say, okay, I'm going to do this because it's really important for them to have this sensory experience. And I can't let my own limitations stop me from teaching this or
Yeah,
exposing them to this.
yeah,
So I feel like it forced me to really think back and figure out like, how can I do this experience with them, or to show them like, yeah, it's totally fine to play with Orbeez. And this is what we do. I may have on like a plastic glove to do it because I don't want to touch those Orbeez. I don't like that feeling of slime and wet. Ugh. Um, but kids, children are just like really, they're innocent, but they're also like, they will point it out. They'll be like, Miss D, why do you have on a glove? Miss D doesn't like the feeling of Orbeez, but I just want you guys to know that you can't put your hands in Orbeez. And this is how I'm doing it, you
yeah.
know. And then what I have found what's happened is the other students that I'm working with that may have those same feelings are like, well, can I wear a glove too? Because they want to experience too. Otherwise, like, we won't do it. We'll just
True. That's
avoid
very
it. You know
true.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, so I have found ways to make sure that we all enjoy it so we don't avoid it. I mean, ultimately, you want to do the experience, but you just can't get past your own, like, whatever irrational fear you have of touching it or
Uh,
doing it, you
well,
know?
that's so interesting that you say that because the first thing that I think of is when you say that is, first of all, that you're giving those children an opportunity to kind of experiment and feel that it's normal and it's okay if you don't like, weird textures or things like that, but you can still have the experience somehow. And I say that because the first thing that I thought about was my children and sometimes the things that I expose them to.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously I want them to try, Peruvian food, and I want them to love it, and I want them to, to feel what I feel when I hear, my music or my things, my culture. But obviously they are not, used to that. and
Right.
and it makes me think about that because you have to let them try until they can. And that's, just to have the experience is what matters in a way. And sometimes I'm not like that. I'm all full on, yeah, you have to.
I can see you now, Daniela. You're like, listen, you're going to listen to this and you're going to eat this food and enjoy it. Okay. That's what's going to happen. They're
I
like, okay, mom.
Yeah, yep, that's me right there. So I know you could understand where I'm come from. But yeah, but I love this because it's opening my eyes to other things as well, and yeah, when I sometimes I have to kind of step back and look into, okay, they're not used to this. This is something new. I don't want it to be scary. I want them to enjoy it. So let them do what they want to do, and not
Right.
parcel. You have to. But I didn't want to escape the piece of cultural misconceptions. And I know that before your quote we were kind of talking about that, because I feel that there's an expectation sometimes when they when you tell them where you're from or what's your background, whether it's countrywide or in relationship of your current status or whatever your profession even sometimes. Um, there's an expectation, and I think that a way that people wanted to put you on this block, in this nice container,
Mm-hmm,
to
mm-hmm.
understand. And I don't think they do it to be rude or misleading, but it's just to understand you better. So I don't know about you, but when I hear or when I tell people, I'm from Peru, sometimes I get looks like, oh, wow, very interesting or something like that. I'm like, okay.
Right.
But I feel that some people also picture me living in the mountains, in a very, in a very, I don't know, I don't know what they imagine that maybe I, wore different clothing and stuff like that. And they have this conception of it because they want to understand, where I'm come from. And obviously, not everybody does that. Um,
Right.
some people have been there and they understand what it, how it looks like and what it is. Um, and but in order to, I think, connect that connectivity as humans, we just kind of have a picture in our head, whether it's because we have seen it on TV or because we have seen it on TV.
You're like speaking to my soul right now. Daniela, you don't understand.
Go
You
for it.
don't understand. You do understand. Let me not say you don't understand because you do. You really do. Um, Keep going. I'm sorry. I was having
Okay.
a moment.
That's okay. I appreciate that moment because I know you understand as well. But in all that capacity, and I don't think it's a fault, and maybe I understand it better because especially coming to when I came to this country, for me it was a culture shock, a very strong one, and I also have to put myself in that capacity of understanding this culture and the people here, and understand that it's not like they picture it on TV and it's not like they picture in that. So I kind of have, what I will say, a spoon of my own medicine. You kind of stop criticizing, those people that don't know about my country, but because why? I mean, they all are not going to have the capacity to travel to visit Peru,
Right.
right? And
Right.
as much as I was lucky enough to come here and understand this culture as well, and being able to experiment different areas of this culture. But yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be honest. Sometimes when they talk to me about my culture without knowing it, yeah, it makes me upset, of course, as it would do anybody, I think. But those misconceptions, the capacity of for us to kind of open up and know the person as a person. And yeah, she has all this cultural background and stuff like that. Great, and that adds more to that person, but not classifying them into this box of you're just this because you are all these things, kind of thing, right?
Yes. Yes. Um, this is like such a very interesting conversation. So I'm gonna just like preface this by saying this is not my way of like, and this is why I do Black in Nature. This is why I have a podcast. But a lot of what you're saying is very relatable to the content of what I'm currently putting out and what I'm going to be putting out. And ironically, this coming week, I'm actually going to be talking about stereotypes. And there's a reason for that because I can't talk about being in nature without addressing certain topics because this is a big part of my life, whether I'm in nature or just living my life. People, when they see me, they see a Black woman. That's what they see. They don't know me. And most of the time, depending on the setting, they either want to try to get to know me or they don't at all. And
Mhm.
it's pretty obvious and how they go about, however that individual or individuals choose to engage with me. Or they just assume because I am a Black woman, this is who I am. And sometimes it's based off of their own experiences or based off of what they've seen visually on TV or whatever. I don't know. I don't know where the conceptions like come from, but it's been a big part of like, I feel like that it's been a part of my whole life, especially being a military child and then like moving around with the Army. It was the same way. So I'm speechless for once because I'm just like, you don't understand, but you do. But what I've realized, even when I have started working and really starting to process these things, it's been hard to either talk about it or write about it. But it's also been like very therapeutic in helping me understand myself and also like trying to help educate others too. And it really boils down to what you just said. Like, it really boils down to getting to know the person and not making the assumptions. Like, you've got to have a conversation with people in order to know who they are. You know, this is why I love your podcast. This is why I love podcasting, because it gives that extra like space for folks that may not, and I don't want to say folks, but sometimes it is uncomfortable to try to have these conversations. But maybe if you're listening to this podcast, you're like, oh, I never thought of it that way. I may have been making somebody feel awkward. Yeah, you have. You have made me feel awkward. I'm just going to say that. Visual. It has been awkward.
I feel.
It has been so uncomfortable sometimes. And I just like smile and nod like, yeah, okay, that just happened. I don't know what's going on here. But it's like, can I have the same conversation you just had with someone?
Oh my God.
Like, can I have that same conversation? But no, instead they talk to me about fried chicken. That's what I get. Yes, Daniela, I'm going there. I'm going there because there's a camera.
I love it. Keep going there.
But I mean, I'm just like, it's unbelievable. It's like, that's all you want to talk to me about is food? How about we talk about children? I really like, I've studied early childhood my whole life. No, we are literally talking about food. And I'm sitting here like, I don't like chicken with bone, skin, and fat. I like Chick-fil-A nuggets. You know? Like, I'm like, I'm not going to lose my black card, but that's just the truth. It's a textured thing, you know? Not that I won't eat the chicken, but that's just my point. Sometimes, like, but my point, even though I'm like laughing about it, but sometimes that's like the port of entry people use. They're like, well, I heard. They don't say it that way, but that's how they come across. They'll introduce themselves. And they're like, hi, I'm so-and-so, or I'm Dr. So-and-so. And, you know, there's this amazing poem that's talking about like grits. What does that have to do with anything that we're doing right now? Right. Nothing.
And
you know,
I know, and that's where I was thinking about that connectivity. I think that it's that almost urged to feel connected to somebody, and this is all you know about. But I think that what my point here is that sometimes we need to see beyond that and beyond. If you want to have that connectivity, you have to look at the person for the person, not necessarily for what you may know about their culture or what you may know about it, because we don't want to expect you to know everything. And even if you know a lot about where you're from or, your work or stuff like that, that might not be part of me. There's a lot of things in my culture that I honestly don't want to be related to because I don't do those kind of things, or it's not me. So, and the same with you, right? Talking about fried chicken.
I'm telling you, that's like one example. One.
Okay, so we'll do another episode for rants. Only.
I'll start working on my list now. And
Me too. But it's not that, because we want to connect, and I want to allow people to do that connection. I don't want that to stop you from not connecting with us and not connecting with other people that maybe you're very interested on. And because I think that when somebody may have say, oh, I also an outdoor person, and I also maybe have not gone through that because of camping, it's also gardening, and that could be a conversation because it's your interest. But until you get to know that person for their own interest and know how they may look, or making assumptions because of how they look, then I think that opens up to a more interesting and in-depth conversation that the other person may want to engage with too.
Right.
So
exactly.
yeah. So that's that went there, and I love it. I knew you were not gonna hold back, so I appreciate that.
Listen, we were going there. I was like, oh, and this is visual to you. So you're really seeing like how I really feel about this.
Yes. You can, yeah, they get to see it and experiment it and all of it in between.
Yes.
So that's right. So like I said, I don't want to leave this with a sour note, because there's a lot of more things that I want to talk about. And like I said, this episode could be many episodes on the going. It's not gonna be just as simple as closing with, oh, okay, yay, this note. But I do wanted to share something about my culture, because I'm very proud of it. And I define my culture as a side of being me, what has made me, which involves a lot of things. For me, it's sports. The fact that I am Peruvian, that I am a city girl deep inside, not anymore. Big
I
time.
understand.
You understand?
Yes.
Yeah. So all those things that define me, but also the fact that my family, it's I had two really great sides bringing me up. My mom's side was very culture oriented. Uh, they come from a family that appreciates culture very much, and arts and expressions. And my dad, on the other side, is also cultural in the fact that I remember many sessions on my grandparents' house with my dad and his three brothers just singing Peruvian music. And the nights will end like that. They have a guitar, they had what we call a cajon, and they will sing, and my grandpa will sing. And so I had that, and I always took it for granted, because I was like, oh, well, they, the same thing every time. And like I said, on my mom's side, she brought up my, love for art, for writing, for reading, all those things, and that mixture of cultures, although they're all kind of are related, they were very different. And but at the same time, they mixed up so well, and I appreciate that being encouraged on me, because I feel that if it wasn't for my grandparents in a way, and what they thought it was something important for me and for my parents to encourage it, I don't think that I will be leaning towards doing a lot of things that I'm doing now. I appreciate them so much now. I wish I could appreciate it when I was much younger, obviously, but I do appreciate them so much now. But at the same time, I'm also glad, because now it's when I need to appreciate them, because I have my kids and I can, hopefully encourage them. They may not appreciate it now.
Right.
I'm hoping they appreciate it in the future. Here's fingers crossing. But yeah, but I don't know who in your case it was those people, or that taught you about culture, or your own culture, or or maybe it was yourself, or realizing something. I don't know.
I definitely feel like my nana and my grandmother played a huge role. Because when you're growing up military and you're going through so many different cultures, part of what I learned is that as you go through these other cultures, whatever culture you have, I'm not saying like you have to be very careful just putting it out there. Like, I'll just use Turkey as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Turkey at the time was like very underdeveloped depending on where you lived. If you were going off base, like you probably should, like highly recommended you wear a scarf. Um, and some people would say like, oh, well, I'm not going to do that. Well, it, I'm not from Turkey. So out of respect, you do you do what you have to do. So I felt like, I think what I realized as an adult, it was my grandparents that helped me hold on to my own culture, like where my parents come from, because I didn't, they grew up in one spot, but my brother and I didn't, or I should say I didn't in more ways than he did. Um, and so I really kind of, I feel like it reflects in my life today. The
Yeah.
fact that when my husband and I moved back here and moved back to Arizona and we bought a house, and I'm like, and we're going to plant a garden. I knew nothing about gardening, but I remembered that from my childhood with my grandmother. You
Mm-hmm.
know, there's just different things that they, the two of them together, I see it reflecting in my life now. And if it wasn't for them, I don't know that I would be who I am today. As far as my parents, I mean, I felt like they just kind of kept me, I don't know, they were just like watering the roots of what my grandparents did for me.
Right. At
And
the
they just
exact.
like kind of they just guided me and just really would push me to like, Diona, you just need to do your best. Like, regardless of whatever you're doing, do the best that you
Yeah.
do. That's all we ask. And that's what I carry with myself. That's what I do. Um, I've always just, I can't say like everything I've tried, it was successful,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes the answer is just no. It is what it is.
Yeah.
But um, but yeah, I feel like that's what's helped shape and mold me a lot. I've had to rely a lot on extended family to keep
Mm-hmm.
me connected and to keep me grounded into something versus nothing, you know. Um, but yeah, and I think even today, just being married and having an 11-year-old now, which is kind of crazy to say, um,
Oh.
it's just interesting. I'm curious to see like the things that my husband and I have done. Like, what is that going to look like for her? Because
Mm-hmm.
her experience is very different than what either of us grew up with. I'm like, I kept moving around until I was 15, and she started moving around when she was 6. So I feel like she can relate more with like my parents and with my husband, and like what it's like to be rooted someplace.
Yeah.
I don't know that. I didn't do that till I was about 33, 32, 33 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I imagine she can grow into who she wants to become sooner than later. Whereas I feel like I had to figure that out on my own, and probably much later than life than most, because
Yeah.
I was constantly moving around, so.
That is different, I'm sure. I When I was growing up, I also moved a lot, and so I completely understand. Not necessarily to other different territories, but at the same time, it was a move disappeared.
Exactly.
I kind of struggle with that because I felt that at a certain point, we're done here. We have to go, and staying in one place for such a long time has kind of breaking the knowledge of my culture as well, because
Mm-hmm.
a whole different adaptation. I don't only have to adapt to being an adult, but I also have to adapt to being an adult way differently than I did when I was a child. And I think that adaptation personally cost me quite a bit. It was a lot of a struggle, but you know, that adaptation I think is part of the culture as well. You know, how you can't expect, I guess, to be the same all the time, things the same all the time.
Right.
You can expect to be just as it was in your childhood. Yes, you can probably, you as a mom probably can understand this, that a lot of experiences that we did in our childhood are going to be represented through our own children.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things that we did, like you said, the garden, that's something that you want to experience. I'm sure that you wanted your child to experience. A lot of the different things, as much as you can and as much as, you know, you're able to, you want them to experience the same because it brought you joy, because you
Mm-hmm.
know, it was something, a happy moment for you, so you want to share with that too. But as we adapt as adults, I think that the only thing that I can say in regards of culture is that it never ends. I think that I'm
No.
still building culture as I grow, and which is, I think, something amazing. And I um, I wanted to continue doing that because I think as a family now we are trying to build our own traditions, our own culture as a family. And like I said, I have a mixed kind of family that is complicated to say the least. But it's, I think that's the joy of it, that
Right.
you're working on it, and the work process. I think it's what you should enjoy, not to get to the final product of it, but the, you know, all the mixture of different ideas, of different traditions, of different things, and creating your own, right? Because
Yes.
you could
Yeah.
probably
I want to add
understand that.
something. I'm like, yes. So I'm speaking to the listeners here.
Yes,
So Danielle and I met like 8 years ago, because I had to think about that. I'm like, how long have I known Danielle?
I did too. I
I'm
did
like,
too,
we've known
actually.
each other 8 years. That's a long time.
I remember listening
So
little.
so and when I was thinking about that, you know, as I've continued to say, like growing up military, there's just different ways in how I've tried to stay connected with people. Um, and when I say staying connected, it doesn't necessarily mean like by phone call, text message.
Mm-hmm.
It's whatever I remember from that individual, like I carry that with me. And so I'll never forget, Daniela and I were working in behavioral health, and she was listening to this music. And I'm like, Daniela, what is that? And you're like, it's bossa nova. And I'm like, bossa nova? I've never heard of that before. How do I find it? And you're like, oh, it's just on Pandora. So for the record, I want people to know every day, and I shower every day, I listen to bossa nova music. I have
Yes.
been listening to this music for 8 years. And I know when I am like rooming with others, because I play it like right there in the shower, you know, I'll like walk out and I'm getting myself ready, and people are like, what kind of music is that? And I'm like, oh, it's bossa nova. One of my really good friends, she's Peruvian, and I just love this music. And I like ventured off into like bossa nova jazz. Like I've gone there, but I just want you to say like that's a big like music is something that I try to carry that. And so
Yeah.
you impacted my
Oh,
life.
that's so
Until
sweet.
this day, I'm still listening to bossa nova, and I love it. I love
I
it.
That's so funny because I remember that. I don't know why so vividly. I think we were in the car or something, going somewhere. And I was just so excited that somebody else liked it, because I'm not gonna take credit for Peru on this one because this is Brazilian music, but, and I don't want a bunch of Brazilians getting
Like
my,
what?
but yeah, no, it's beautiful music, by the way. If you get to listen to it, please do. It's beautiful. The funny thing is that I always play it too, and I think just gives me peace, and I don't know, transports me to, you know, being in the ocean or something like that, super relaxed. So much so that I actually played it a little bit for my daughter before going to sleep one night, that she was just like, I'm not sleepy. And now every so often she's like, can I hear to the music that you have? I'm like, oh, so that means a lot, Dee. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
But on that note, I think that a lot of the things that we do sometimes um, has a lot of parallels, because in a different way, because I feel that sometimes we are very different, but in so many ways, especially maybe through arts or something, we just
Hmm.
find so many parallels, or maybe the way we think, or same things, we think the same. It's almost like, oh yeah, you introduced me to this, I'm like, oh yeah, I like this. The same thing with you. I actually knew of your friend back there because of you. So I love that you have that poster. Yeah, big fan, I know you are.
Yes, huge fan. Yes, yes.
But I got to appreciate his music because of you. So
Oh,
I find myself listening to Bruno Mars more than often, more than I used to, at least. And
yes.
time I listen to him, I think of you every single time. But those, I think those are the connections that we found, that kind of attract us to each other, is that you knowing a little bit more about me, maybe, and me knowing more a little about you. And I want the listeners to think about that, when you connect with somebody or you want to interact with somebody, it's seeing the person beyond what they may be looking like, because you want to know their culture from them, and from who they are, not necessarily of how they may look or where they may come from, or what profession they do, or or anything else, or what they do for life. Because I think that we, as unique as we are, it's what make us more attractive to another person, and what makes that connection to another person.
Hmm.
So as a listener, I want you to think about that. I want you to try to also learn from other people, and from other cultures, and their own culture and their own background, and their own traditions, because sometimes you get to learn something that you might like, that you might end up liking and embracing it. So Dee, I want to thank you so much for being here. This meant so much to me. I want to wish you the very best on your podcast. If you guys please get to listen to her podcast, is pretty amazing. um, and I hope that we have another one of these conversations.
Yes,
I would really love it.
absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was so much fun. So
Yes,
much fun.
I
Thank
know.
you.
We need to do this again.
Oh, we should. We
And
should.
visually, you're okay with
Yes.
visually now? Yeah.
Yes.
This was our experiment. Okay, to all the listeners, thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.